everybody, and welcome in to episode 54 of the Dorton and Doetkott Debate podcast. I am Lucas Dorton. Obviously, that is not Nick Doetkott. That is David Luehring, ladies and gentlemen, the Milwaukee Brewers, Wisconsin man here. David, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Lucas. Glad to be here.
Absolutely, man. First off, we talked about it a little bit before we started recording, but behind you, that is sick. For those of you, who like Sports Illustrated and stuff, do that. If you have a lot of them sitting around, do what David is doing right now. That is sick. I got to do that for mine.
Yep. Just some old collections, my old Wisconsin Packers, Badgers, Brewers, Bucks stuff, had to throw them up on the wall.
What's your favorite one?
It's hard to say. Probably this one here with Aaron Rodgers and all these little guys hanging off of him and stuff.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's probably one of my favorites there.
That's cool, man. Yeah, that's really awesome too. So I gotta ask. So you're Wisconsin sports fan through pretty much everything, but then Michigan State. Now, where does the Michigan State fandom come from?
Well, it started. My brother actually ended up going to Michigan State, so he kind of brainwashed me into liking the Spartans. He'd be texting me and stuff. Hey, we watching the game or whatever, and so I slowly began to like the Spartans and stuff, and watch them, and got into it.
That's pretty cool. So do you like the Badgers and stuff too then, or are you more of a kind of 50-50 Spartans Badgers kind of guy?
I'd say I'm more of a Wisconsin fan. If the Badgers are playing the Spartans, I'm gonna cheer for the Badgers, but if the Spartans are playing anyone else, I'll be cheering for the Spartans.
Sure. Yeah, we'll have to see how they do. Do you think they'll have a chance at the tournament this year? I know they've kind of been scuffling a little bit lately, but
the Spartans it'll be interesting to see if they even make it here. They're right on the bubble and stuff, where they're right on the edge. The Badgers have been not looking so good at all recently, but they'll be in the tournament, and you never know what happens.
That's true. I don't think my Gators are going to make the tournament either. We've been pretty inconsistent, so we'll have to see what happens. Oh, man. Yeah. It's just, I remember the highs that we had, Wisconsin and Florida when we played each other in that Sweet 16 game a few years ago. Obviously, sorry to bring up bad memories, but the Chris Chios at 3. Yeah. But it's just crazy, how much both of the teams have really just kind of fallen off a little bit since then, but
yeah, how times change,
Yeah, that's true. That's sports, I guess. That's sports. Well, enough about college sports. Let's get into what we're actually here for, and that's the Milwaukee Brewers. So last year, Milwaukee went 29-31, which is good for fourth in the Central there for them. Obviously, in the 60-game season, so they didn't play an entire full 162. So finished right around 500. What do you think? Because to me, it shows there's kind of some inconsistencies in some places if you're finishing like right around 500. So what, from your observation, was some things that was maybe the bigger concern over other things for Milwaukee last year?
Well, their offense was really not up to snuff what it had been. Like a lot of their offense runs through Christian Yelich, and obviously he didn't have his usual season last year. So that was kind of like a huge spot right there where their offense just was lacking. The pitching staff and everyone and the defense in general played well. Corbin Burns had a breakout year, and Woodruff has turned into a really good pitcher. But their offense just did not carry their weight.
Yeah, it's kind of tough too when a lot of teams, and I've seen it a lot of times, especially as a Rockies fan too, all these years with Nolan Arenado kind of being our main offensive guy. His story and Blackman and stuff too. But it seems like when the main piece, the middle of the lineup guy, is just not doing well, it's like a domino effect. It seems like everyone else also does bad. So besides Yelich, though, was there some, maybe players that you didn't expect to step up or have much of an impact that they ended up having an impact last year?
I'd say another big part of it was Lorenzo Cain's opt-out was another
Yeah.
piece of the puzzle for him. So Avi Garcia had to step up and, instead of playing the first guy off the bench, he ended up playing basically every day in center field for us. So that was kind of a big move for him.
Yeah.
I mentioned Corbin Burns before, and Devin Williams is probably the big breakout everyone's going to talk about. But yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, that's kind of it's kind of tough too. The Brewers, it's kind of weird because, and maybe you'll know more about this than I do. Maybe this has to kind of play into what you're just talking about. But they were in the NLCS a few years ago, and they for me have been a team that has really fallen under the radar and really dropped off a lot. Now, in your opinion, do you think that NLCS run was like a, and I, in sports, I hate to use the word fluke because I truly don't, I feel if you are in the playoffs, you deserve to be there. And I don't want to call it a fluke. But do you think that a lot of things went right to where they were able to get to the NLCS and maybe they exceeded expectations? Or do you think now, with how they've been the last couple of years, they're kind of playing at maybe what they are expected to play at?
I'd say like it all kind of came together. Like it was just a right fit. Everything just fit with contracts and stuff where you could have Grandal and Moustakis and some of these bigger name players, but they were right at the end of their contracts. So then, it was kind of like a 1-year deal. They talk about the last dance or whatever for the Bulls, kind of like that, where it was, hey, all these guys are free agents and stuff. We're really good, but it's not going to be the same next year type of deal.
Right.
So that's kind of what happened. We just kind of lost talent, and
it was just everything lined up perfectly for you to have success. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was the year. So then that would have been Houston. You would have played Houston, right? Was that the year that Houston was in the World Series?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah. Now, do you think if you would have made the World Series that year, do you think you beat Houston?
They're smashing on garbage cans and stuff. Who knows?
Yeah, that's fair.
Who knows what would happen?
Who knows? Yeah. Catch a hot streak. I mean, heck, you made it all the way that far. I'm going to be honest with you. I did not think the Brewers were going to be in the NLCS. And they did a heck of a lot better than I thought they were going to. And sometimes, you see teams that just go on magical runs and they just can't be stopped. And so maybe they were a team of destiny that year. Maybe they would have been. I don't know.
Yeah.
It would have been tough to go through the Dodgers and the Astros back to back. But
yeah, they definitely had the talent that year to do it. It was just wasn't meant to be.
Sure. That's fair. So you talked about the pitching a little bit, kind of being a little bit of a concern this year. Milwaukee, it seems like they've never, well, not never, but in recent years, they really haven't had like the go-to like ace. You can maybe say Brandon Woodruff was, but I mean, definitely correct me if I'm wrong, but probably since like Zach Greinke, you probably really haven't had a like legit ace number one type guy. So in your opinion, and obviously the offseason pretty much over, we're in spring training now, but do you think that's something that the Brewers have to try and do, is be aggressive to try and get like an ace? Or are you more of, well, let's see what we have within our team, within the farm system, and try and see if we can get something there?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of been their model of building from within a lot of the time. That's part of their issue where, well, I guess not issue, but it's just kind of how they build their roster where, Corbin Burns and Brandon Woodruff, yeah, they had amazing seasons last year and everything, but, if you're not a Brewers fan, it's not the name of Justin Verlander or whoever. Where so that's part of it. Where a lot of it's just name recognition. Where Corbin Burns last season was, among the leaders in ERA all season long. Where they do have pitchers that are of that caliber. To me, it's like the back half of the rotation where it's like, yeah, we got these two stud starters behind him, though. That's where my worries come in.
Sure. So do you think, it kind of sounds like it, so do you think Corbin Burns could potentially be that true ace for you guys at some point? It's kind of hard to say. I mean, he's pretty early on in his career yet. But from what you've seen, it kind of sounds like you seem pretty optimistic that he could become that.
Yeah, he's really changed a lot of like his mechanics and stuff through the years. Like it's kind of went through a 3-year saga with him. The first year he came in and pitched out of the bullpen, was a real stud in the postseason and stuff, and everyone was all super optimistic about him. And then in 2019, they threw him in the starting rotation, and he pitched very bad. He was at an ERA over 8, and he was just a train wreck. Yeah. So they sent him down to the minors. He ended up in AAA by the end of the year. And then last year he came back and he ended up switching like what his main pitches were. Like his main pitches the years before that were the slider and the 4-seamer, and he switched it to the cutter, and the 2-seamer was kind of last season is what he switched to his primary pitches, and it really made the difference for him. You could see the results and stuff. So
whatever gets the job done, honestly. I mean, geez, that's pretty cool though.
Yeah.
Now you also did bring in so you have Lin Bloom, Brett Anderson, and Adrian Hauser. I would assume would probably be your 3, 4, and 5. Now, whatever order that is, I don't know. What do you think you can expect from those guys going into next year? Especially, Brett Anderson has been around a little bit too, but as far as the other guys, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think the key for them is kind of some of these off-season acquisitions. For Hauser and Brett Anderson, they're very like ground ball dominant. They try to produce ground balls. Oh. And adding Colton Wong, who's a Gold Glover at second base, is huge for us with that, because Keston Hiura, our second baseman before that, he was rated as like the worst second baseman for defense in the league. And then you had Colton Wong, I was looking at some stats today, and according to like defensive runs saved or whatever that stat is, he was by far the best second baseman, like 15 points better than the second best person. So it's going to be a big improvement that will help these ground ball pitchers out a lot, where they're not getting extra people on the base paths and stuff.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was going to be my next thing, was talking about the Keston Hiura and Colton Wong thing. So obviously, you move a guy to first base, you're typically you're not expecting him to do a whole lot defensively. You don't have to do as much at first base as you might have to in the middle infield. Keston Hiura he's a good bat, he's a good young player, and I think he has a lot of potential. But you obviously talked about the defensive side of it is kind of a big liability there for sure. So do you think him making the transition to first base is something that he can find some success with, or what do you think might happen there?
I think it's a great fit for what our roster is and kind of how the Brewers have done things before. In the past, they've moved Travis Shaw to second base. Mike Moustakas even played some second base and stuff like that, where they just kind of move players around. And so I think it fits well with kind of just how the Brewers roster is. And right now they don't have like a bona fide first baseman. So they have more middle infield depth with Urias, Arcia, where it just makes sense to move, here out to first where, you could still use his bat and, you know, he's not going to be needed quite as much to, turn your double plays and stuff and make everything work.
Right. So this is another thing that I'm glad. So I'm kind of glad that we that we didn't do the podcast until today, because you just signed Jackie Bradley Jr. too to a two-year deal. Talk about an outfield. If you hit it to the outfield, nothing is getting past any of them. Christian Yelich is a really solid defender. Lorenzo Cain is one of the best defensive center fielders in the game, and Jackie Bradley Jr. might be top 3 best defensive outfielders in the game too. And you have all 3 of them in the outfield. Now, Bradley Jr.'s offense has not been great the past couple of years, but his defense has remained consistent. So how do you like that signing for the Brewers?
It's kind of a head scratcher a little bit, just in depth wise, where, you look at the roster and you say, well, what's the strength going in? Normal, you would say, outfield, you had everything figured out. You got a lot of money stacked up in the outfield already. So it was a little bit like, oh man, we're getting another outfielder. But, once you look into the details a little bit more and you kind of think about it a little bit where, they're trying to make up for their offense not being as stellar. How do you do that? Save a few more runs in the outfield, or Colton Wong can do the same thing for you in the infield. So it was a little bit of a head scratcher to begin with, but once you looked into it, you're like, oh, okay, I see this. I can see how this works well for us.
Now, where does that leave Avi Garcia too? Because and an already loaded outfielder. I mean, obviously you're not gonna bench Yelich. If Lorenzo Cain's playing, you're not gonna bench him, and neither Jackie Bradley Jr. So, do you think Avi Garcia maybe kind of does some platooning? Did he play any first base when he was in like Chicago and Detroit at all? I can't remember.
Yeah, I know he hasn't played first for the Brewers at all.
Okay.
But who knows if he's thrown out there for a couple of games somewhere else.
So where do you think he fits in now? Just kind of a bench guy and play when needed, or power bat off the bench? What do you think?
Yeah. So I'm gonna throw this out too about Avi Garcia. He actually kind of the news from camp is he's lost 40 pounds on the offseason. Okay. So, I don't know what that means for a power hitter like him, who's, his calling card was hitting 20 home runs a season type of deal. But I think in general, I think, Lorenzo Cain has had injury problems with just nagging injuries and stuff like that. And he could be like a great guy to just keep him fresh, using the NBA's term of load management type of thing. It might be good to just keep Lorenzo Cain fresh by, you can move JBJ into center and, he's got the range to play center field, and give Lorenzo Cain some days off. He is 35, and he's really key to what the Brewers do in leadership and all these other factors too. Lorenzo Cain is just so keeping him fresh and ready to go, I think, is a key.
Sure. Yeah, and you can never have too much depth too, which is nice. So maybe that's kind of why they spent a little more money on Bradley Jr., knowing that they had Garcia and stuff out there too. But
yeah,
that makes sense.
Even last year, when they signed him, we had Ryan Braun out in the outfield instead. So it turned into like, oh, suddenly we lost Cain. All right, we got 3 guys.
That's true. So, well, I guess I wasn't going to bring it up now, but since you brought his name up, might as well. Ryan Braun. So obviously he's a free agent. He's not on the Brewers anymore. What is your, I guess, overall opinion of him? Because I've talked to some people who are kind of from that area, and obviously with the whole steroids thing, it seems like it's mix. Some people still really like him. Some people just think he's a great player. And some people are like, well, that was kind of dirty. And that whole thing that happened with the PED stuff, I don't really respect him anymore. So where do you fall in that line of the Ryan Braun saga?
Yeah. So obviously the PEDs and stuff, I don't condone it. Like,
Right.
you're not supposed to take steroids and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
Ryan Braun is, he's, for my generation of Brewers fan, he's the pillar of, he's the guy who's been through, the 2008 run, the 2011 run, even the more recent years. He was there through all of them, and just really had really key moments for a lot of these playoff races and stuff where, these other guys, they've only been around a couple of years. Yelich has only been around
right
for a couple of years and stuff like that. So Ryan Braun really has he's just, even though his best years were considered under probably the PED era or whatever like that,
yeah.
Even past that though, he was still hitting 280 and would just be a really clutch player, other than Yelich the last couple of years, it was always, who do you want at the plate with 2 outs in the 9th inning? You want Ryan Braun.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah.
So that's kind of my feeling there.
Sure. I will always have beef with Ryan Braun because he took the Rookie of the Year away from Troy Tulowitzki in 2007.
Yeah. I mean, what can I say?
Ryan Braun playing third base, he had like 26 errors. I knew like his first year, he wasn't a great defender, and that's why they moved him to the outfield. But I was really looking at the stats, and he was not like he was really bad at third base.
Yeah.
Like his hitting and stuff was amazing, but he was not a good defender. So the move to outfield obviously worked out well for him.
Yeah, they had some real growing pains at the start. I remember there was always like, well, he's playing third today, or he's playing the outfield today. We'll see what we get out of him out there.
That's fair. That's fair. So another guy that I want to touch on, his first year was with Milwaukee this last year, Omar Navarra as a catcher. Obviously, I'm assuming you didn't predict he was going to be hitting under 200 based off of the year before. Looking at his stats, he had a line of 278, 353, and 460 with Seattle with 22 home runs, 55 RBIs. And then last year in 40 games, it was 176, 294, 269, and had 2 home runs and 10 RBIs. So what are you expecting from Omar Navarra this year? Do you think he can produce like he did his first few years with Chicago and then with Seattle? Or do you think, 2-3 months in, if it's the Navarras that you saw last year, maybe you're trying to trade him or try and get someone else?
I mean, to me, the catcher position, it's not necessarily always your most potent offensive position where, I'd love to see him come out and, hit the stats he put up in Seattle. But, from what I've seen, I'm not sold on it happening. I mean, I know it's the pandemic year and there's a lot of things, moving parts and stuff. And I'm just not necessarily sold that he's necessarily going to revert back. But, it's the catcher position. You get what you get out of him. And yeah.
I think if you're catcher, I mean, if he's a good defender and he calls a really good game, I think you'll take that a lot more than if he's kind of sucks at offense. Which I don't know. Does he play defensively wise? Does he play pretty solid?
I'd say he's a league average. I wouldn't say he's any elite catcher or anything in that phase. The Manny Pena is a much better defender for the Brewers, that's always been Pena's calling card.
Do you think opening day, you think they roll with Navarez or Pena? Which one? Or maybe they do both. What do you think?
My guess is it'll be Navarez just to, you got to try him out. He only had 60 games and
right.
A lot of things can change, but.
That's fair. Let's see. Going into the depth chart here, this is ESPN. It sounds like a lot of the guys that you've kind of talked about are probably going to be starting. And then I guess, want to touch on shortstop and third base. with Luis Urias and Orlando Arcia. Are you expecting both of those guys to be playing shortstop and third base for you next year or this year, I guess?
Well, it's kind of up in the air still. We brought in Travis Shaw into camp to try to see if he could make a run at it and see if he could make the roster. He's came in on $1.5 million contract, nothing crazy, but
Yeah.
Last year, Travis Shaw had some signs of life playing for Toronto, where it was like, oh, he's kind of reverting back a little bit closer to what he was in 2018 and 2017. So they're kind of looking at maybe having Shaw make the roster. I've seen a lot of stuff where he makes the roster too, and they've been playing Arcia at third a lot in spring training games and stuff like that right now. Testing him out there, even though he's the incumbent shortstop.
Sure.
Where I don't know, it's kind of a question mark out there. Where Urias is he's a young guy. He's still only 22, 23. Where he's got all the potential in the world, but he hasn't necessarily shown it here at the big league level. Last season, he had a hot streak of 20 games when he first came back from COVID and stuff. But then, he tailed off by the end of the season and people weren't quite as high on him. He was hitting 240 by the end of the season. And then Arcia's, he played fairly well for Arcia. Normally he's been known as more of a defender rather than an offensive bat. And last year they got 260 out of him, and he was playing fairly well on the offensive side where, it seems like they're moving towards slowly phasing out Arcia and bringing Urias into play short. But, it's not a done deal when Travis Shaw might be kind of a stopgap piece at third base too, to kind of move pieces around if things aren't working out.
Sure.
And kind of another piece of this puzzle is the Brewers' top prospect is a shortstop as well, Bryce Terang.
Okay.
And he's kind of knocking on the door of making the roster and stuff like that, where it might be like, well, we got to see what we got out of Urias here before, otherwise we might just end up cutting our losses with him and bringing Terang and roll with what we get out of Arcia. So that it's still kind of up in the air. It looked from Craig Counsell's comments a couple days ago, it looked like they were going to try to put Urias at short, Arcia at third, but who knows what happens with Travis Shaw too.
So do you think Terang did he get a spring training invite?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So do you think that at some point, maybe not out of spring training, but at some point during the season, do you think he gets the call to the big leagues? Or do you think he's maybe about a year out yet from really making his mark on the team?
Yeah, I'd say he's probably a couple years out, still a year or 2 years out.
Okay.
If it was the old 40-man rosters for September, I'm sure he would have gotten the call up and stuff for that. But it's just how it is in the game, where they just have some depth there, and they're not quite sure what they have. But I think it looks like they're going to roll with the other two for now.
Now, a couple other guys that I saw in here so I guess we're kind of going back to catcher and first base. I didn't realize that until I just looked at the roster here. So there's two guys' names that popped up. There's Jacob Nottingham and Billy McKinney, so catcher and first base. At one point, both of those guys were really, really high-rated prospects in baseball. Do you think either of those guys have a decent impact on the team this year, or do you think it's probably going to be Pena and Navarra as a catcher, and then probably mainly Keston here at first base? What do you think happens there?
I'd say it's probably mostly going to be Keston here at first base. from what I've heard, is kind of a Daniel Vogelbach was another guy that he played very well last season down the stretch, and he's kind of gained a little bit of a cult status with the Milwaukee fans, where it's like, oh yeah, he played really well. We want him on the roster still, but ultimately his roster spot, his best spot would be the DH, which it's no guarantee that it'll happen this year. So my guess is it'll be Keston Hiura and then maybe a little bit of Vogelbach at first base. And then Nottingham, he has been on the roster before, and in most times, he has made the roster a couple of times, I believe. Even before last year, he's been, up and down where, you got a couple injuries or whatever, and bring him up. But I think he'll be in the mix if we have issues or Navarra's isn't performing, but I wouldn't say opening day he would be, top of the list. And who is your other guy you mentioned?
It was mainly just Billy McKinney and then Nottingham. Yep.
Kind of McKinney, kind of what I heard on that was, hey, I'll give him a spring training invite, see if he pops. If he doesn't, whatever.
No biggie.
No biggie. And if he does, awesome. We need a first baseman who can really do something for us. But that's kind of my read on that.
Okay. So I guess we can touch on the designated hitter stuff and those kind of rules going on in baseball right now. So me personally, as far as the DH goes, obviously I'm an NL guy, Rocky's NL. For the longest time, I was always, I like the strategy. I like the, how it's not as easy as just throwing a hitter up there and just hitting. Like there's a lot more stuff behind it. And then recently starting to think about it, it's like, there are very few pitchers that know what they're doing with the bat in their hands. And even at that point, they're still not a threat up there. So maybe having an actual hitter in there would be nice so you don't have a weak spot in your lineup. So where do you fall on that? Are you more of the traditional no DH, keep it in the AL, or would you be open to having that in the NL too?
I'd say I'm more of a traditionalist on it. I enjoy just kind of the strategy of it, of, a guy saying, well, let's walk this guy because we got the pitcher coming up. Oh, well, this pitcher's hitting 200. It's just a lot of times your catcher isn't hitting much better or whatever. Some of that stuff is like, whatever. And, for me, like, I always enjoyed, watching the pitchers hit and, there's Giovanni Gallardo hitting a home run or whatever, where it's like just really digs it in on the other team and stuff like that. I think it's kind of a little bit of a pride factor too, I guess.
Yeah. Fair. No, I appreciate a good pitcher dinger any day of the week. That's for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, honestly, I think whatever side they would, if they do eventually ever come with a concrete answer, I'll probably be fine with either. I probably will. But
yeah, I mean, honestly, in this last pandemic season where they had it more and stuff,
right.
It didn't necessarily bother me, but
no, yeah, sure.
For me, it's
a personal preference.
It's it's more just tradition and.
Sure. No, you can't go. That's a legit answer. I feel you there. Yeah. So now we can get into some predictions now too. Everyone's favorite part. So Milwaukee Brewers, assuming it looks like we're going to have a full 162 game season is what I've been seeing. So where do you see Milwaukee finishing next year in the division?
I personally see him ending up second behind the Cardinals.
Okay.
Adding Arenado, I think, was a really big move for them. Sorry about it. No need to bring up a hard a hard trade for you, but I really think the Cardinals have the better roster. I think we're squarely in the race. And from everything I've seen on projections and stuff, I don't think it'll be a over 5 games separation between first and second anywhere for the NL Central this season. And for me, I'd say like the Brewers, they're somewhere between 80 to 85.
Okay.
85 wins, something like that, is probably the sweet spot of where they'd end up, where you're right on the edge of, are we in contention for the wild card, are we not? But we're in the picture, we're on that graphic on the TV where
yeah. Yeah, it's kind of tough. I mean, Pittsburgh, they ain't going to do anything this year, so you don't got to worry about Pittsburgh. Cincinnati, I really think I think they're about a couple years out yet from being a really good team. So then it comes between. So then it's the Cubs, the Cardinals, and the Brewers. Yeah. I definitely think it's the Cardinals' division to lose. I think they'll be at the top. But then after that, how do you see the Cubs faring this year? Do you think they're going to be a thorn in your side at all much, or not really?
Well, I mean, as a Brewers fan, they're always a thorn in our side. They come up to Milwaukee because the tickets are cheaper and bother us. But I see them as being very similar to the Brewers and where they end up. They're definitely going to be competitive, but they just have a lot of changes in like their rotation and stuff where I don't know, it's hard to say exactly what they're going to look like.
And losing Darvish too, trading him is definitely a huge loss, definitely.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's say, say Brewers, they get 85 wins. Let's say they get to that 85. Do you think 85 wins will be enough to make the playoffs?
I'd say the sweet spot is 87. I'd say that's how many you need to make it. But, they're right in the ballpark. Ball bounces the right way, suddenly you're at 87.
That's fair, yeah. They call it a game of inches for a reason. It's the smallest things can have a huge impact on the game. So, good point.
Yeah.
Good point. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think the Brewers definitely have a lot of potential. I think, if Navarra can get back to form offensively, that's going to be huge. I'm not worried all about Yelich. I mean, how many hitters last year were just awful that typically are great? I mean, him, Bellinger. I mean, there's so many. I'm not at all worried about them.
Yeah,
he'll get back to form. I think I'm really interested to see how Colton Wong and Castanera do at second and first base. I think that could be great. And then if the pitching, does their job and gets outs and stuff when they need to, maybe they do get to that 87, 88 win mark. I don't think it's I don't know where I would put them in the division, but I don't think that's out of the question that they could get to those at that 87th win. I think it's possible.
Yeah. I think they're right there. To me, it's that second tier of the rotation, like Woodruff and Burns.
That's a big question mark.
I think you're fine there. It's just those next guys. Brett Anderson's had injury problems. Lin Bloom was a KBO MVP, but he hasn't necessarily translated to the majors here so far as we've seen. Hauser's been kind of inconsistent, and it's just kind of like, well, maybe they make a move at the trade deadline or something to bring someone in and really stabilize it, because they got really rock solid bullpen too, where you got Hayder and you got Devin Williams and all of those guys you feel really good about. It's just kind of getting you those 4 or 5 innings to the bullpen.
Yeah. There's a reason I didn't even bring up Josh Hayder, because I knew that's not even an area of concern for you. So it wasn't even worth wasting my time about. Probably going to get 40 saves, have a sub 1.5 ERA, 100 strikeouts, something like that. But
yeah, it's to be interesting to see. I would hope they would kind of move back to a little bit more of those longer relief stints he was doing, the
Okay.
2-3 inning save or stuff like that. Just because he's so valuable, and when you can really lock down those games, then of, oh yeah, all right, our chances of winning this have just gone way up, rather
Right.
than having those two other guys in for the two other innings, and we
Yeah.
didn't make it to Hayder, and now we're down, whatever.
Yeah.
So, and Council's been really good about using that. And you have some other guys who can close. Devin Williams, he's closed a couple of games before. Brad Boxberger, they've had in camp as well. As a closer, he's been closed before. They got some other guys who could step in and fill that role, so you could have some flexibility with Hayder and really, to me, maximizes his
Yeah,
value.
potential. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Nice. Cool. Well, that's pretty much the end of this Brewers podcast. Now, I will ask you some kind of questions to get to know more about you as a Brewers fan. But before that, is there anything else like Brewers wise, or anything that you maybe want to bring up or talk about that we didn't touch on?
Um, let's see here. I think we pretty much covered everything I was thinking about here. I had a few notes written down. As far as like the rumor mill this offseason, um, they were in the talks for the Justin Turner signing, which I think would have been very big for
Yeah.
the expectations of this season. But obviously, moving to Milwaukee versus LA, I'm sure that had a lot to do with it. And if they would have got him, I think a lot of people would be all in on the Brewers bandwagon this season. But it just didn't work out and everything. And yeah.
Cool. So we're going to get to know more about you as a Brewers fan. So these are fun questions because I get to learn more. I get to hear what people's favorite stuff is. So I like these questions.
Oh boy, here we go.
So the first one, the first few shouldn't be too difficult. It's the last two that typically stump a few people.
Yeah.
So, who is your all-time favorite Milwaukee Brewer?
We kind of went over the Ryan Braun stuff, where to me he's probably my favorite. But obviously there's some baggage along with that and whatever. But on the current team, Lorenzo Cain is definitely my favorite player there. He's a really strong character guy and really fun to watch with the catches over the wall and just stealing
bases. Good clubhouse guy and someone to have on your team to keep everything together. For sure.
Yeah. Really exciting player too.
Absolutely. Okay. Now, who is your all-time favorite non-Brewer player? Now, they maybe could have played for the Brewers at one time, but they had to have spent the majority of their career elsewhere.
Ooh, it might be. Yeah, it might be. It's an interesting one here.
It's a tough one. That's a tough one.
Because normally you don't naturally think of it.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah,
here's another Brewers one that came to mind while I was thinking of other players.
Okay.
John Axford is also probably one of my all-time
favorites. Yeah, he was on the Rockies for a little bit. He played pretty well with us. I like John Axford.
Yeah, I loved him. You listen to him on the Brewers on the radio, and Bob Uecker would be saying, "Oh, the Axeman cometh, coming back for the bottom of the ninth or whatever, or the top of the ninth."
That's awesome.
So anyway, that was a sidebar of I had to throw that in there as one of my all-time favorite Brewers.
I like that.
Besides that, I really sticked with my Brewers most of the time. I really enjoyed Hanley Ramirez was another one of my favorites back in the day.
Okay.
I always enjoyed closers in general too. I
Sure.
just enjoy them. I think it's the stat of save is always an interesting one to me, where it's it means nothing basically, but
Right.
but it's always like, oh, he's got to get the save and stuff. It's an odd construct where I've always enjoyed that, where they do a lot of things just so people can get the save, even though
Right.
what does that even really mean? Oh, he got 3 outs in a row. um, so like Canley Jansen and Trevor Hoffman, he played for the Brewers, but he
Right.
played for the Padres before that. I
Yeah.
enjoyed him before that, and
Sure.
yeah. So there's a few.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair. No, there's no one right answer, so I'm okay with that. I like that for sure.
Yeah.
So now, what is your all-time favorite Milwaukee Brewers moment? So it can be some random game at that beginning of August that no one besides a Brewers fan is gonna remember. It can be a playoff game, anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a few.
And if you have a few, that's fine. You can share a few of them if you have them.
There are a few that come to mind.
Okay.
Obviously, there's some real iconic ones of the 2008 playoff run. There's a Ryan Braun grand slam, which basically put us in the playoffs. That in Brewers like pamphlets and stuff, they always have this picture of Braun's all excited and stuff, and they use that
That was
picture.
when Braun had the long hair
Yeah,
too.
with the long hair and stuff. That's probably the most iconic one. Um, and then just the whole CC Sabathia experience was really amazing, just because it was like, really, he's going again on the 3 days rest, he went 8 innings.
Unbelievable. That is unbelievable. I mean, especially this day and age, you don't see pitchers do that ever, ever. And how many straight starts was it like? Oh, CC was only third day rest. Let's do it for the 5th time this last month.
Yeah.
But like he was always elite too. That's the thing. You think he'd be tired? He wouldn't do well. He would pitch as if he had just the 15 days off in a row. But it was 3.
Maybe it's just nostalgia kicking in, but it always seemed like he was pitching 7-8 innings every time anyway, even though he was on 3 days rest, and it was
Man, imagine if you could have kept him.
Imagine that we all wanted it, but it just
it's tough when you're competing with the Yankees. That's tough to do.
Yeah, exactly. He enjoyed it here too. Like, you see, like, I've seen stuff on social media and whatever of him and like Giannis connecting, of just over like the Milwaukee experience and stuff like that. And it's like, oh man, you could tell he enjoyed it, but it's hard to turn down the huge paycheck and stuff from the Yankees.
Yeah, it is. And he got a World Series out of it too. So obviously it worked out well for him. But,
yeah, exactly.
One that comes to my mind, it's just the T plush. The T plush hit up the middle against Arizona. That's a classic one.
Yeah, that was the days. I was in high school during the time, and I just remember there was just a rush of T plush jerseys, because they had made
that was crazy.
T plush, and everyone was buying them at the high school, and it was like, what? And then the next year he was trash, and it was like, oh, all right, whatever. But everyone's got these jerseys.
Yeah, the saga. I think it's really funny, and that's one of my favorite things about sports, is that, and you obviously see it too, is fan bases getting behind just the most random players that they were probably trashed before that and probably trash after that. But for 1 or 2 seasons, that was like worth the price of admission in itself. It's just the fan base is getting hyped about that one just random player.
Yeah, exactly. Jonathan Lucroy, for a couple of our really bad seasons, he was kind of the guy where we're all like, oh, Luke and stuff, Luke in the stands and everything.
I'm trying to think for the Rockies. I think when Jason Giambi was with the Rockies his last couple years, there was probably the same thing. I mean, it was like a cult following for Jason Giambi because Todd Helton was still on the team at the time. He was kind of at the end of his career. But Jason Giambi was always coming up in like the bottom of the ninth, the most clutch situation, and was just hitting nukes and winning ball games at like 42 years old. Just a big, burly, freaking axe man out there just hitting bombs for us.
Yeah, looking like a grandpa hitting home
Looking like a
runs.
grandpa, yeah, 50 pounds overweight, just go up there to hit dingers and that's it. But yeah, no, that's funny though. Yeah, no, those are good ones. Those are good ones. And yeah, go ahead.
All right, I got two more other random moments here. Another one is Brandon Woodruff's home run off Kershaw.
Yeah,
that was pretty nuts because for me at the time I was working for the Bucks, and they had the games on. It was actually a Bucks game that night too. So we were at the arena and getting ready to film the Bucks and stuff, and there I was in like the what do you call it, the conference room or whatever, where they had food and stuff, and they had the TVs on and whatever, and there was just like a weird Milwaukee atmosphere where at the Bucks game people are cheering for the Brewers and stuff, and it was just a crazy atmosphere of combining both of the teams and stuff, where everyone was cheering for each other, and you come into the room again to check the Brewers score, even though the Bucks game is going on. Everything.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, you have another one?
Yeah. I got one other one here. Is probably a lot of people won't remember this one, but it was one of these slog fests that it turns into an extra innings game, and it starts with the 10th, and it ended in the 18 innings or something, and it was versus the Pirates, and one of those games where you're always looking at the stands and it just decreases. It's one of those weeknight games, and there's like two people
be work in the morning, kids got school.
Yep. And we ended up hitting a walk-off, and how those TV announcers and stuff are. They're like, "Oh, thank goodness, it's finally over. We can go home." That's another one that just stands out for no apparent reason, but
that's fair. No, that's cool. No, that's cool. It's kind of like a pride thing too, with those really, really long games like that. To say like you watch it for like the whole thing, it's like it's kind of cool, but also I don't think anyone would blame you if you decided to go to bed for the night either.
Yep.
That's awesome. And then what about your favorite non-Brewers moment in baseball?
Favorite non-Brewers moment? It's tainted, but Altuve's home run versus the Yankees, really, for me, that was a very, very interesting one. I really enjoyed that, where it was like everything just seemed to click right, where it was really kind of very exciting and everything, and I really enjoyed that moment there.
Yeah, I really like that one a lot too, and unfortunately, like you mentioned, with the whole trash can thing and stuff, kind of puts a cloud over it, but still. And I remember watching that too, and I remember when he hit, and it was obviously right when it happened, so nothing about the trash can stuff came out. I remember watching that, and I was like, okay, that was like a slider up from Aroldis Chapman, who like predominantly throws fastballs, and Altuve was like, I mean,
right on it.
And he ruined that pitch. So at the time, I was like, how did he know that Chapman was just going to casually drop a slider in there, and he just ruined it? Well, obviously, now we probably know how he squared that up so perfectly. But
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I like that. So I got to ask, where does the Cardinals' David Freese postseason heroics? Where does that fall for you? Obviously, being a Brewers fan, kind of rivals with the Cardinals. Where does that go? going to play for you?
Well, obviously I was rooting against the Cardinals in the
Yeah, so
series,
was I.
but he really had an amazing run, and you can't fault him for that. It was exciting to watch.
Yeah,
I think I have more appreciation for it now than I did
right.
then. Where in the moment where I was just like, no, lose, I don't want you to hit it, um, but yeah, it was quite a run there for Freeze.
Fair. That's fair. That's fair. Cool. Well, I think we're at the end of the show now. So, is there anything that you want to plug in for yourself, or bring anything that you want to talk about and throw in there at all?
I mean, I'm just I'm working for the Dayton Dragons right now. If you're in the Ohio area, come out and watch some minor league baseball. Come watch some of my videos on the big board. Uh, you can follow me on Instagram as well. I think it's David_Luehring is on Instagram.
Yeah.
Uh, I post some sports videos and stuff on there as well, which can be a fun watch as well.
Yeah, folks, definitely follow the Instagram, because during the pandemic, well, I guess we're still in the pandemic, but when it was really at its height and no sports were going on, it was always cool because you're always posting those videos that you put together of like top moments, or like some of the best runs that we've seen in sports and all of that. And those were really, really cool. Those were really awesome. I like those a lot.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun doing it too during the pandemic. None of the sports going on. It's like, oh man, I want some sports. Here we go.
Yeah,
I'll take some
putting stuff
videos.
together. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Nice. Cool. Well, folks, for the other people at home, definitely follow David on Instagram. Talk some sports with him and stuff like that. Don't talk too much about the Packers though, because he's probably still.
Yeah, that's a little.
Probably don't want to bring that up to
But
him, but maybe give it a few more months. Wait till after the draft and stuff.
yeah,
But anyways, yeah, if you want to follow myself on Twitter, you can follow it at Lucas_Dorton. If you want to follow the Twitter page of the podcast at DND_podcast. So be sure to do that. But anyways, David, thank you for coming on. I had a great time. I hope you did too. Maybe you didn't. I don't know.
no, it was my pleasure. I really enjoyed it
Awesome.
talking some Brewers.
Absolutely. We'll have to do it again soon.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. All right, folks. Thank you for listening to episode 54 of the Dorton and Duckett's Bay podcast. As for David and I, until next time, we are out.